Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 287, A Bite to Remember. The episode begins with May and Max observing some Pokemon, while the two of them hid in the tall grass, as they were bored of simply walking through the forest, so they wanted to try and do something to stimulate their brains for once. They soon spotted a Zigzagoon taking a drink from a nearby stream, which made Max excited upon seeing it, although May told Max to be quiet, otherwise he could scare it away. Unfortunately, the Zigzagoon did hear Max and May's shushing, and this caused the Zigzagoon to run off. Max was somewhat disappointed, but he was soon okay, as he and May then managed to spot some Stantler, watching intently until they see some Beautyfly fly overhead of the Stantler and turn their attention to them as well. May particularly loved the Beautyfly, as her and Max following them coincidentally back to Ash and Brock, making them relieved that they had reunited, as Ash and Brock were somewhat concerned that they had lost May and Max. Ash and Brock, along with May and Max, then see a whole bunch of other Pokemon as well, such as an Aipom, a Furret, a Sentret, a Paris. There were Pokemon everywhere. Brock began to count the sheer amount of Pokemon in the forest, as Ash found it somewhat strange to see this much wild Pokemon in one place, because they were all together. It's not like they were just in separate parts of the woods, no, they were all in this specific area that they had stumbled across. Also, I guess I should specify, these woods were not Petalburg woods anymore. We moved past that. We're in different woods now, bitch. Max takes particular interest in some Shroomish that were walking by, as well as a Sudowoodo that was standing like a statue, as stiff as a tree, attempting to relax, as were the Shroomish. So, when Max approached them and was super excited to see them, this frightened the nonchalant Sudowoodo and Shroomish as they ran off. May told Max that he should probably calm the fuck down, since he had already studied the Pokemon, so he knew what they looked like, so he shouldn't be fucking busting a nut at what the Pokemon looked like. Max obviously admits that May was right, he had studied all the Pokemon before, but he stated that seeing them up close and getting personal experience with Pokemon was even more interesting, and proceeds to name off a list of several Pokemon that he wanted to see from Kanto, Johto, and Hoenn. Ash understood what Max meant by this, stating that he didn't want to just watch people win battles and make new friends, he wanted to do that himself, which was why he went on his journey. And also agreed with Max that he wanted to see as many Pokemon as possible, though Ash's reason for this was because it would help him on his quest of becoming a Pokemon Master, which, as far as he was concerned, simply involved seeing a whole bunch of Pokemon and becoming a more experienced trainer. With Ash having agreed with Max, Max was very pleased and went up to Ash, believing that he would now listen to his rants, as he proceeded to rant about how all the Pokemon would run away whenever he went up to them and asked him why, leading Ash to remind Max that Pokemon were not just objects to be studied, they had their own lives, so they would act on their instinct, and if they thought that the person watching them was going to annoy them, then they obviously wouldn't want to stay there. Brock then laughed, as he told Max that Pokemon weren't the only living creatures that focused on going by their instincts, as that's exactly what Ash did, referencing all the times that Ash had solely made decisions based on his recklessness and impulsiveness rather than intelligence. Ash just laughed back, realizing that Brock was right, and that humans and Pokemon were pretty similar, when just then, his thoughts were interrupted, as he heard some Pokemon howl in the distance. Max then spots the source of the howl as he looks up at a nearby cliff to see that 3 Pokemon had walked across the forest and already made it towards them, as they then jumped from the cliff and growled, running towards Ash and the gang. The Pokemon soon surround Ash and the gang, and May points out the obvious, that they were angry as fuck. Max identified them as Mightyena, having researched them before, and Ash takes out his Pokedex to confirm this. May, referencing the fact that Ash knew that Pokemon acted on instinct, suggested that Ash acted on instinct as well to come up with a solution to help them escape the angry Pokemon, or befriend them, believing Ash could do so because he seemed to be good with Pokemon, but Ash replied that the Mightyena were too angry for him to deal with right now, and they would have to battle them to get away from them to escape to safety, so he sent out his Pikachu. However, Brock and May noticed that it wasn't fair that Pikachu had to fight 3 against 1, so May sent out her Torchic to help, and Brock sent out his Fortress to help. Pikachu went in for the first attack, going for a Thunderbolt on one of the Mightyena, but the Mightyena dodged and then tackled Pikachu, sending Pikachu back. Brock told Fortress to use a tackle combined with a Rapid Spin on the same Mightyena that had knocked out Pikachu to get revenge, but just then, none other than a Poochyena shows up and tackles Fortress and Torchic, as well as Ash and Brock, knocking them all to the ground. Ash and the gang then assumed that the Poochyena must have been part of the Mightyena's pack, due to the Poochyena immediately joining the Mightyena in front of them, as it and the Mightyena stared Ash and the gang down, threatening to attack them again. Before the Poochyena and Mightyena could attack, though, a green-haired woman then stepped up behind them and commanded them to stop attacking, and they listened, effectively ending the battle. Ash and the gang were about to thank the woman for stopping the battle, but the women then sternly asked them what the fuck they were doing in these woods, leading Ash and the gang to explain that they happened to stumble into these woods and needed a break because they'd been walking for so long. The woman then introduced herself as Katrina, and unfortunately confirms that Ash and the gang were not permitted to rest here, as this area was a Pokemon preserve, and explains that that was the reason why the Mightyena and the Poochyena had attacked, since they figured that Ash and the gang were threats to the preserve. This leads Ash and the gang to apologize for the misunderstanding, as they reveal that they had no idea this area was the preserve. They were just on their way to Rustboro City and happened to arrive in the woods. Katrina believes them and apologizes for her sternness and her Mightyena and Poochyena's attacks, explaining that it was just their nature to want to protect the area, as was hers, as she then introduced herself as a Pokemon Ranger who was in charge of watching over the Pokemon Preserve and protecting it from poachers with the help of her Mightyena and Poochyena. Man, if only she was helping out the Larvitar egg back in Johto. Ash and the gang easily accept her apology as they introduce themselves, with Brock cutting in during the introductions to flirt with Katrina, which the Poochyena and Mightyena could see was making Brock uncomfortable, so they then proceeded to tackle Brock to the ground, wanting to protect her. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they happened to be wandering through the same woods, extremely tiredly, as James suggested that they were probably lost, really wanting some food because they were hungry as fuck. Not only were they searching for food, but they were also searching for Pokemon, having heard that this area was known to have Pokemon from someone, likely a representative at Team Rocket, who knows. Team Rocket were disappointed when they found no Pokemon or food when suddenly they noticed one Pokemon, a Murkrow, and it flew by and landed on a tree. Upon seeing this Murkrow, Jessie looked behind the tree and noticed a whole bunch of other Pokemon as well, including a Furret, Azurill, Aipom, Blossom, Paris, Hoot, and Spinarak, declaring that they had just been too tired to notice these Pokemon before. Team Rocket were obviously very excited by seeing all this Pokemon and decided that they were going to try and capture them all, but then Wobbuffet interrupted by forcibly popping out of its Pokeball, spotting a sign, and bringing Team Rocket's attention to it, holding it up to them. Jessie thought that Wobbuffet was just trying to be annoying as usual and just trying to poke them with the sign or something, but James realized that the sign had some words on it and wondered what it said, so Team Rocket read it, discovering that it declared that the area was not a random forest, it was, just as Katrina had stated, a Pokemon preserve. This made Team Rocket excited, because due to it being a preserve, that would obviously mean that there were plenty of Pokemon in the area, beyond even the ones that they had seen. And the Pokemon were likely relatively weak, because they had to be watched over at a preserve, so with that, Team Rocket plotted to capture all these Pokemon for themselves. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, Katrina was now showing Ash and the gang around the preserve after they had requested to see some of the Pokemon. Once they got to a nearby shack on the preserve, which happened to be Katrina's lodge, she explained that her job on the preserve wasn't just to protect it from poachers, but also to take care of all of the Pokemon and help them if they got sick or injured, which was the reason why she brought a lot of these Pokemon to the preserve in the first place, so that they could get better. And she then showed them several of the Pokemon she was currently treating in her lodge, being a Ninetales, Hoot, Furret, Blossom, and also a Tauros, who was outside in the fenced area behind her shack, attempting to regain its strength after injuring its leg, so it was trying to get used to running again, despite still having the cast-on flag. As Ash and the gang watched the injured Pokemon relax inside the shack, Katrina began tending to an Azurill, placing it down after checking on its injuries. Seeing Katrina in action only made Brock fall in love with her harder, complimenting her on being able to help Pokemon in two ways, both as a doctor and as a ranger. Brock falls in love with her any more when he realized that being a doctor and a ranger was similar to what he wanted to do, which was being a Pokemon breeder, and was excited at the fact that they had the same hobbies. So, Brock proceeded to flirt with Katrina by telling her this, and stating that they could make a pretty good team, and Katrina agrees to an extent, allowing Brock to help her look after some Pokemon. But just before he could, the Poochyena saw that Brock had intentions of getting really close to Katrina, and hit him, knocking him down to the ground with a tackle because of that. It then tried to start scratching his face, growling at Brock angrily. Katrina quickly picks it up though, not believing that Brock deserved to be injured again, as she scolds it for harming Brock, making the Poochyena a bit embarrassed, while Brock fell more in love with Katrina, claiming that she even yelled beautifully. Yeah, I could see Brock having a stepped-on fantasy for sure. The Poochyena was tired from getting yelled at, so it immediately went to sleep on a little pink mat, and while the Poochyena was asleep, unable to do anything, Max took the opportunity to borrow Ash's Pokedex and scan the Poochyena with it, wanting to learn more about it, believing it was very cool. Seeing how the Poochyena hung around with a whole bunch of Mightyena as opposed to other Poochyena, it declared that the Poochyena must be almost ready to evolve into a Mightyena soon, and it must have been hanging around all the Mightyena because it wanted to evolve into one. Katrina doubted that Poochyena would evolve soon though, stating that it was born at the exact same time as the group of Mightyena. They were in the same egg group, but for some reason, Poochyena hadn't evolved yet, even though all the other Mightyena had. Max questioned why this could be, leading Katrina to state her theory that the Poochyena simply hadn't battled enough, as opposed to all the other Mightyena, as it only knew Tackle and hadn't even learned any other moves yet. So that's why she figured that it was still pretty far off from evolution. And Katrina further stated that although Poochyena would likely evolve eventually, because, it eventually would have to gain enough experience to evolve, even if it was a slow, arduous process, if Poochyena decided that it wanted to not evolve and remain as a Poochyena its entire life, she would gladly respect that, stating that it wasn't a problem if it never evolved. After all, a Pokemon Preserve was about making Pokemon happy, and if Poochyena was happy being a Poochyena, that was fine. Max questioned why Katrina would be okay with the Poochyena staying a Poochyena, stating that Mightyena were much stronger than Poochyena, so there was no drawbacks to the evolution. Max then tried to explain this to the Poochyena, waking it up due to his enthusiasm, trying to entice it with the fact that it could become stronger, and also stating that Max himself really wanted to see an evolution since he had never seen one in person before. Poochyena didn't seem interested in anything Max said, as it merely just cocked its head, turning it away when Max formally requested it to evolve, asking it if it wanted to. Max tried not to get discouraged, just declaring that he would do everything he could to help Poochyena evolve, believing that even if Poochyena didn't think that it wanted to evolve right now, then it would definitely want to evolve. It just didn't know what it wanted yet or some shit. Upon all this talk about evolution, May became interested, wondering what her Torchic would evolve into, as she imagined a giant buff Torchic with huge abs, but she quickly realized that that would be kind of anticlimactic and lame, realizing that evolutions likely change the Pokemon a lot more than just making them way more buff. She then realizes that she could find the evolution of Torchic by looking it up in the Pokedex, so she does so and finds out that Torchic evolved into a Pokemon called Combuskin. Thinking that she should have her Torchic evolve as soon as possible, with Max echoing this sentiment, perhaps wanting Torchic to evolve even more than May, believing that May should do something to help it evolve quickly. However, Ash stated that Pokemon didn't evolve quickly. That's not how it worked. They had to gain experience in battle to evolve first, and May's Torchic would need plenty of more experience before it could evolve, adding that you couldn't force a Pokemon evolution. Brock then added, so long as a Pokemon was treated with proper love and care and received the proper training, then it would evolve eventually. Max admitted that all of the studying that he had done had proved that what Ash had said was right, but he was still frustrated with how long it would take. Brock tried to get rid of Max's frustration with how long things took, though, by telling him that if evolution was just achieved right away, then it wouldn't be as fun to have Pokemon evolve, and it wouldn't feel nearly as rewarding for either the trainer or the Pokemon. And Ash elaborated, adding that an evolution would not be nearly as exciting if you didn't understand your Pokemon or hadn't bonded with it or been through any battles or challenges with it yet. Also claiming that a Pokemon evolving mid-battle in a Deus Ex Machina moment was awesome as well. Max and May then questioned why Ash's Pikachu hadn't evolved into a Raichu yet, because, yeah, they understood that waiting for the evolution was the fun part, but knowing that Ash had been with Pikachu since the very beginning of his journey in Kanto, they did find it weird. This led Ash to explain, particularly to Max, that there were in fact Pokemon who didn't want to evolve, much like how the Poochyena might not want to evolve, referring back to how his Pikachu had refused evolution into a Raichu. Max questioned why Ash was okay with Pikachu refusing to evolve, stating that Ash would clearly do better in battle with its evolved form, Raichu, but Ash rebutted that he wanted his best friend to be happy, so if it wanted to stay as a Pikachu, then he would let it, much like how Katrina was happy with letting the Poochyena stay as a Poochyena. After May heard that Ash liked Pikachu better as a Pikachu as opposed to a Raichu, she began to wonder if she would actually like Torchic as a Torchic as opposed to a Combuskin, since Torchic would be a lot more cuddly as opposed to the Combuskin. Ash apologized for putting negative thoughts regarding evolution in May's head, stating that evolution definitely had good things going for it as well, adding that he had evolved plenty of his other Pokemon, and advised May to decide whether or not to evolve Torchic based on what Torchic thought when the time came. Max then became confused at how Ash was able to stop the Pikachu from evolving. He only thought the reason why Poochyena hadn't evolved was because it simply wasn't ready yet, or some shit, but Ash said that he had willingly stopped his Pikachu from evolving, and he asked how this was possible, leading Ash and Brock to reveal that there were some Pokemon that evolved through other methods instead of getting experience, and Pikachu was one of those Pokemon evolving with a stone, specifically a Thunderstone. Brock then dressed up in a lecture outfit as he pulled up an evolution chart explaining many methods of evolution, clarifying that there were of course some Pokemon, such as Poochyena to Mightyena, as well as Brock's Pineco to a Fortress that required experience to evolve, and other Pokemon like Pikachu and Eevee evolved with evolution stones. However, he clarified that Eevee was a special case, as it could evolve with 3 different evolution stones, each of them turning the Eevee into a different Pokemon. A Thunderstone would evolve into Jolteon, Firestone, Flareon, and Waterstone Vaporeon. Also adding that Eevee had 2 other evolutions, Umbreon and Espeon, with Eevee evolving into Umbreon at a specific time in the night, and Eevee evolving into Espeon at a specific time in the day. Brock then ends his exposition dump lecture by reciting a poem that he had gotten from none other than Professor Oak, a haiku, to be precise, which stated good luck to some trainers who wanted to catch some Pokemon, hoping that this luck would apply to May and Max. Max just became even more interested upon hearing Brock's lecture about evolution, and specifically evolving Poochyena. However, May reminded Max that Poochyena may be like Pikachu and not want to evolve, but Max didn't care about this, simply rebutting that it was his dream to see a Pokemon evolve, so Poochyena would evolve for him. Fucking cunt. Anyways, Max then immediately declared that he was going to train Poochyena and help it evolve, still of the belief that the evolution would occur relatively soon due to the amount of time Poochyena had been a Poochyena, but Katrina reminded Max that there was no guarantee that Poochyena may evolve soon, but added that if he really did want to stay and help it evolve, she had room in her place for Ash and the gang to stay. Ash declined the offer, stating that he was in a hurry to get to Rustboro City to challenge his first gym, so he didn't have time to stay, but Brock convinced Ash to stay, wanting to continue flirting with Katrina and potentially win her over, promising to do all her housework and chores, and preserve work. Max was thrilled with the fact that they were staying, and declared to the Poochyena once more that he would do everything he could to help it evolve, especially giving it battle experience, as he then requested May to send out her Torchic outside so that Poochyena could battle the Torchic and practice using Bite instead of just Tackle. Katrina gave the okay for this, although May didn't, but that didn't stop Max from just taking Torchic's Pokeball and letting Torchic out. And Max battled it with the Poochyena, telling the Poochyena to use Bite instead of Tackle. This didn't work though, as Poochyena simply just continued to use Tackle on Torchic, knocking it back, but just as Poochyena was about to go in for a second Tackle, it was revealed that the previous Tackle had been pissing Torchic off, so it retaliated with Ember, which burned both Max and Poochyena, knocking Max to the ground, almost fainted. Torchic was proud of its ember and walked away from the opponents that it had defeated, as Max got back up and told the Poochyena that they should probably try a different strategy to make it evolve. So Max and Poochyena went back inside Katrina's place, while Pikachu was eating and Ash was feeding him, and Max requested that Ash send out a whole bunch of his Pokemon that he had with him, being Striko, Tailo, and Pikachu, and they all battled Poochyena for experience, and Ash agreed, wanting to help out Max, but more so just wanting Max to go away since he was busy feeding, and he wanted to keep Max occupied. However, May then interrupted Ash and Max's conversation, having found Torchic outside of its Pokeball, since Torchic rushed back to her, and therefore May found out that Max was trying to battle her Torchic with the Poochyena, and warned Ash not to let his Pokemon battle the Poochyena, because Max was likely just going to try and force them to lose so that Poochyena could gain experience and evolve. And she basically thought that this was a bad thing, since it was a fake battle, so Poochyena wasn't getting genuine experience, and Ash agreed with this, also adding that not only would forcing Poochyena to win the battle by forcing its opponents to lose not be fair to Ash's Pokemon, but it would also not be fair to the Poochyena, since it wouldn't be aware that it wasn't actually as strong as it thought, not being able to actually fully take out Ash's Pokemon. May then also restates what she originally said, being that Poochyena may not want to evolve anyways, so Max shouldn't try forcing it into battles, and Ash agreed with this. Max was disappointed with May and Ash's refusal to help, so he simply just went outside with the Poochyena and watched it interact with the Mightyena, sadly watching as the Poochyena was training with the Mightyena, but only training its tackle, using it over and over, making Max mad, as he knew that Poochyena wouldn't evolve if it just kept using the tackle, as it showed that it wasn't trying its best to gain experience and learn more moves. Ash and May then walked outside and saw Max's disappointment, leading Ash to state that what May had said was right, which was that Poochyena may not want to evolve, just like how his Pikachu didn't want to evolve. Adding that Pokemon not want to evolve was a very common thing, explaining that Pikachu was still immensely strong despite it not evolving, and it being confident in its current form helped it become strong. Ash then questioned Max if he understood what he was trying to say, with Max obviously not understanding, as he simply responded that Ash must have just not wanted him to have Poochyena win any unfair battles, but he was gonna make Poochyena evolve with fair battles, as he ran off with Poochyena further into the preserve, away from Katrina's building, wanting to train it more against some wild Pokemon. Ash and they were confused by Max's sudden outburst, and the fact that Poochyena followed Max further into the preserve, but their thinking was cut off as Katrina then came up to them and first asked how the evolution was going and how Max was doing, with Ash and May responding that neither of them were doing very well. Katrina then revealed that she had actually come up to May and Ash to show them something, and showed them a part of a net that she found during one of her patrols, which she knew was a trap for catching Pokemon. Ash and May realized this as well, and declared that there must have been Pokemon poachers somewhere in the preserve, and warned Katrina about this, although Katrina was already aware, due to seeing the net. Ash and May were surprised that there were actually poachers on this preserve, as they felt that Katrina had done a pretty good job of keeping them out, but regardless, they declared that they were going to help Katrina find the poachers. Meanwhile, it was revealed that the poachers were of course Team Rocket, who had captured a whole bunch of the wild Pokemon in the preserve, such as a Sentret, Azurill, Shroomish, Aipom, and Sudowoodo, as well as a Furret, and proudly looked at their captures, cheering, debating what the fuck they should do with all the Pokemon, until they eventually realized that they could just give all of them to Giovanni to get a promotion, and then began to fantasize about what they could get once they got a whole bunch of money from this promotion, with Jesse fantasizing about getting a brand new fucking mansion. But Meowth interrupted Jesse and James' fantasies, as he alerted them that Max was by himself walking through the preserve with a Poochyena through some nearby bushes. As for what Max was actually doing with the Poochyena, he was showing it potential wild Pokemon that it could battle for experience, but he couldn't seem to find any wild Pokemon that he deemed fit for Poochyena to battle, as he only came across a Paris and a Murkrow, and he wanted Poochyena to battle against easy opponents, which meant it could get a lot of experience. However, he didn't think Paris or Murkrow would be easy opponents, since Murkrow could fly to avoid attacks, and Paris could administer a stun spore. Back with Team Rocket, they were currently spying on Max and Poochyena from some bushes, and Jesse got excited upon seeing Max, suggesting that if Max was in the preserve, then the rest of the gang must be there as well, and suggested that they use Max as bait to get Ash and Pikachu to come out. However, they then overheard Max trying to talk to the Poochyena about how cool it would be for it to evolve again, and also talking to it about how he was trying to find an easy opponent for it to battle so it could get experience, but Poochyena was just looking at him sadly, indicating that Ash and May were right, and that it really didn't want to evolve, but Max just didn't recognize this. Anyways, Meowth, hearing that Max wanted Poochyena to evolve, suggested that Poochyena may evolve into a strong Pokemon, which would explain why Max wanted it to evolve so much. So therefore, Team Rocket decided that they wanted to capture the Poochyena, and proceeded to plan how to do so. And this plan involved taking advantage of Max's want to evolve the Poochyena. So they soon put their plan into action, as they disguised themselves as scientists, as Max was disappointedly walking through the preserve, as he hadn't found an easy opponent for Poochyena to battle. Eventually, Max encountered a strange machine in the forest of the preserve somewhere, and he initially just tried to walk away and ignore it, not really caring about what it was, and finding it a bit suspicious. However, this led Jesse and James to reveal themselves in their scientist disguises and reveal that they had built this machine, and also explained that they were doing top-secret research with it, and begged Max not to tell anyone about what the research was, with Max agreeing, although only if the scientists would tell him what the research was, as he was curious. This was just as James and Jesse had planned, as they told Max that they were researching evolution with their machine. Although making sure to whisper so that Max would still believe that it truly was top-secret research that they were hesitant to tell anyone about, even though this definitely wasn't the case, because they wanted Max to know about this. Because sure enough, Max was instantly intrigued upon hearing about a machine that was involved with Pokemon evolution, so he asked more about it, leading Jesse and James to reveal that the machine could make any Pokemon evolve. And Jesse decided to give Max a demonstration, as she placed Meowth inside of the machine and closed the door. James then pressed a button that caused some lights on the machine to turn on, going blue. Although the machine didn't actually activate, it was just James faking it. As Jesse then opened up the hatch, acting like the machine actually did work its magic, and Meowth emerged as a Persian, although unbeknownst to Max, since he hadn't seen a Persian before. It was just Meowth in a Persian costume. It hadn't actually evolved. While Poochyena was a bit frightened upon seeing this obviously fake Persian, Max was entirely fooled, amazed that the machine actually evolved Meowth into a Persian, and excitedly asked them to use another Pokemon to do another evolution demonstration, and James and Jesse claimed that they could just use Persian, claiming that it could evolve into something else, as they then closed the hatch again, with Meowth still inside, and this time, when the machine fake activated, Meowth emerged in a Sunflora costume, which he had actually worn before, back in Johto, which Max thought was an actual Sunflora, which actually made him confused, as he knew that Persian couldn't evolve into Sunflora. Jesse simply protested that nothing was impossible with science if you tried hard enough, claiming that that's why science evolved so quickly, because people were just constantly making new discoveries, and she said that this Sunflora, being an evolution from Persian, was simply a new discovery, explaining that this new discovery was much like how Albert Einstein discovered the ability to invent the light bulb, and compared the situation, claiming that people told Albert Einstein it was impossible to create a light bulb, and he did it, so it was the same thing with this. People said it was impossible for Persian to evolve into Sunflora, but it could. However, Max corrected Jessie, reminding her that Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, so Jessie changed her story, simply stating that the machine had the power to have Pokemon evolve into any Pokemon their trainer wanted them to. Max was skeptical, so James rapidly tried to prove this by fake activating the machine multiple times, forcing Meowth to continuously change costumes, claiming that he was a whole bunch of different Pokemon, such as an Azurill, an Aipon, a Pikachu, and a Murkrow, because he seemingly had all of these costumes somehow. Don't question how he got them. Eventually, while James was still fake activating the machine, Meowth realized that he had run out of costumes he could use, and was too exhausted and rushed to come up with a new Pokemon to transform into, or try to create a new costume, so he merely just combined the costumes that he had. But by the time he was done, he was still a little late, so Jesse angrily pounded on the machine hatch, telling Meowth to come out, as he emerged with a combination of all of his costumes, having a Sunflora face, Pikachu ears, a Persian body, and an Aipon tail, along with Azurill cheeks. Jesse and James saw Max become suspicious at this, obviously, so they tried to jump in front of Meowth and hide what he looked like. But Max was not convinced, and believed that something was weird about the machine, causing a Pokemon to essentially fuse, and declared that he would rather have Poochyena evolve the natural way to not have any risk of these complications, as he picked up Poochyena and began walking away. But Team Rocket stopped him, as Jesse grabbed Poochyena from his hands and reassured Max that the machine would work, as they put Poochyena in the machine and the doors shut. Max tries his best to protest and grab the Poochyena from the machine, but Jesse and James restrain him and state that Max had no choice. Poochyena was gonna evolve. And just then, Team Rocket went through with the rest of their plan finally, with Poochyena in the machine, as Meowth exploded the machine from inside and grabbed the Poochyena and used the force from the explosion, as well as the dust caused by the explosion, to take the opportunity to escape the scene and go to the Meowth balloon with Poochyena. And by the time the dust had settled, Max saw that Meowth had arrived in the Meowth balloon with the Poochyena inside, and Jesse and James quickly hopped in the balloon as well, stopping their restraint on Max, who then saw the net of all of the other captured Pokemon Team Rocket had captured attached to the bottom of the Meowth balloon, and Team Rocket began flying away as they put Poochyena inside the net with the rest of the Pokemon, and sarcastically thanked Max for giving them the Poochyena. Max demanded that they give Poochyena back, but Team Rocket obviously refused, and taunted that he couldn't do a thing about it since he didn't have a Pokemon to fight back, which was why they were excited to take advantage of him without Ash and the gang there. Just then, though, Ash and the gang, along with Katrina and her Mightyena, showed up, having heard the explosion, while they were looking for poachers, with Brock having joined them. Max was, of course, very glad to see his friends, and Katrina obviously accused Team Rocket of being the poachers when she saw all the captured Pokemon, and demanded to know who Team Rocket were, as they threw off their scientist disguises and did their motto. Brock then demands that Team Rocket release the goddamn Pokemon, wanting to impress Katrina. However, Team Rocket do quite the opposite, as James then releases an extendo arm from the Meowth balloon and has it grab Pikachu, pulling him up. And Team Rocket begin flying off, trying to escape, taunting Ash as they did so. The Poochyena inside the net then watched as Ash and the gang, being led by Poochyena's Mightyena friends, gave chase to the balloon, with Poochyena impressed that the Mightyena were doing a lot to try and save it, therefore mostly cheering up from its sad state. Ash then sent out his Tailo and commanded it to fly up to the Meowth balloon and use Peck, though not on the balloon themselves, but on Team Rocket, which annoyed Team Rocket, injuring them, which forced them to stop piloting their Meowth balloon, which caused the Meowth balloon to begin floating down towards the ground. As it did so, Max encouraged the Poochyena to finally use Bite to bite through the net in order to free itself and the other Pokemon. Poochyena was scared to do so and shook its head, not wanting to use another move as it wasn't comfortable with this. But Max continued to beg it to, as Poochyena just continued to stare at him, sadly, because it did want to escape, but it just didn't feel comfortable using another move. However, it soon realized that it had to put its own feelings aside, because it wasn't just it that was captured, but a whole bunch of other Pokemon were sad and captured as well. And upon seeing how sad those Pokemon were, it finally was able to muster up the courage to bite the net with everything it had, and sure enough, the net broke, and all the Pokemon fell out, freeing them. And Max congratulated Poochyena on the great job he did. Team Rocket looked on in shock that the net was destroyed, and were completely dismayed and sad over this. While James, on the other hand, was still more concerned with getting pecked by Tailo, and the pecking was so persistent that it caused Meowth to accidentally drop the hand that was holding Pikachu, and therefore Pikachu fell to the ground, released from the hand, allowing it to use Thunderbolt, which sent Team Rocket blasting off. Max then went up to Poochyena and picked him up, and congratulated it on finally learning Bite, and mustering up the courage to save all of the other Pokemon, and admitted that Ash was right. Poochyena was just as good as a Poochyena as it would be a Mightyena, finally admitting that evolution wasn't necessary. Poochyena was so happy with Max finally accepting it for who it was, and it was so happy with itself for being able to learn Bite. It was revealed that the Poochyena actually did want to evolve, it was just struggling to learn Bite this whole time, so it began to glow. Max and May were confused by this, as they had never seen an evolution in person, but Katrina clarified to them that the glow meant that Poochyena was evolving, and sure enough, the Poochyena evolved into Mightyena, roaring out in happiness. Max was amazed at having seen an evolution in person, and couldn't stop staring in utter amazement at the Mightyena. The other three Mightyena then come up to the newly evolved one to congratulate it, and they begin to rub heads together, showing their bond, as May admired this, really liking the bond that the Mightyena had with each other. Max then walked up to the Mightyena and hugged it as he thanked it for evolving in front of him and congratulated it on being able to do so. Katrina commented that Max must really love Pokemon due to the affection he was showing towards Mightyena, and admitted that he was right to have confidence in Poochyena evolving. Although Max didn't want to part from the Mightyena, he and the gang eventually did, as he said goodbye to the Mightyena and Katrina, and Ash and the gang continued on their journey to Rustboro City.